forced to sort of try and have that unity again, trying to unify with something that's actually greater than us, but also that greatness is within us. So whatever you want to call it, spirituality, God, or to recognize the God within yourself, and when we do that, then there's kind of, you see that when you look at some of the stuff that's coming up, this shadow, all this collective stuff and all the divisiveness and how that seems to play out and wants to tap into our survival mode. It's so much so that it's hard to take. You want something different, then actually, I think the awareness of all that stuff that's going on, it just doesn't make sense anymore. So I'm like, actually, I feel when I see these atrocities happening, it could be like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, the stuff that's going on in the Palestinians and everything else, all of these things come into the fore, which are hard to take and hard to watch.
Hello, and this is Sharon Land, and I am in the continuation of the Surviving to Thriving series on YouTube, and I'm so excited because today I have a long-time connection through Instagram. Actually, it's been years, Kevin Wilkinson, and he is a men's coach and an entrepreneur, and we've always just been able to, no matter how much we've transitioned in our own careers and in our own professional endeavors, we've always been able to kind of stay lockstep with being able to connect on so many different levels, but definitely deeper levels. So Kevin, I welcome you today, and I'm so excited for this conversation. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you're located, and then we'll roll into the Surviving to Thriving concept.
Sure. Thank you it was great to connect with you again, first and foremost, Sharon. And thank you for having me on this project of yours. It's fascinating, the whole subject of surviving to thriving. But before we get into that, then, so I'm Kevin Wilkinson. I'm a hypnotherapist and coach and entrepreneur. I'm very entrepreneurial in that sense, and I feel, but that my entrepreneurial journey is also one of self-discovery at the same time as well. So I'm fascinated in that kind of how that you spoke earlier about the evolution of ourselves, that we're constantly evolving and having the awareness around that. So my recent evolution, well, I was aware of it, but not fully putting a stake in the ground as such. And so I've transitioned recently to working with men specifically, and I think that's come about from doing my own work and men's work, and recognizing that working with a group of men or having men mentor me as well, and being held in a space specifically designed for men, and not having, I've been in, sporting arenas and backgrounds and that the whole physicality side of things. And although the camaraderie is close, it's slightly different in a sense when you work in a men's space. There's definitely no competition as such, but then there's a lot of being held accountable, some tough love as well. And also sort of a guidance and a reliance and a kind of a deep and a love that you won't get from any other type of relationship, really. So I wanted to sort of put my take on that, and also and provide that space for other men as well. So
yeah, I love that you do, and I love that you're doing that, because it is, I feel that it is really there are, like you said, there's been trajectories, there's been shifts, and there are other representations of that. But I love the fact that you are saying that I want to put my stake in this. I want to put my efforts into this, because that really speaks into like what your part of your calling is, right? Because it's so many different people can do so many different things, but nobody can do it the way that you do it, right? And I think that you definitely represent such wonderful success in so many different areas in so many different ways. And so for you to allow others to lean into you and your energy and your capabilities, especially in the supporting men and supporting men as a coach, but it really sounds like you're going into kind of like deep healing as you're describing it, really just like these really deep healing excursions or retreats, or, you know, virtual retreats, I guess at this point, right?
Yeah,
So is that the direction, or?
it is, and there's something about you said about there's something about having a sense of direction and purpose that's super important for the man, and having and it's something that you can't really, someone can't tell you what your purpose is, and it can change over time as well. But I feel like it's so important to have a kind of a guiding star or north star, and this is kind of what I want to do. It's something that's bigger than yourself as well. So once you, and I've, where the disconnect in men's work is, or amongst many of us, and I'm talking as myself as well from my own experience, is that when that's not completely clear or defined, that is where those, you know, the doubt, the angst, the distraction, the busy mind, and not feeling fully fulfilled comes from. And that has a massive adverse effect on people, which puts us in a kind of a state of, well, not in particularly living fully, but also in a space of reactivity instead. So you're more reactive to stimulus in and around you, more so than you actually need to be. If you're centered and know where you're, okay, well, I'm going this way, this is my, well, then things that are constantly distracting you aren't necessarily going to take their toll as much, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many points that you just dropped, so many different gems.
Sorry, I do. That's my mind. Yeah.
I know. I know. And that's so funny, because it's just, every time we talk, I'm like, gosh, you know, it's just that we're so synchronistic with so many different things, right? But first of all, the idea of a purpose, I think it is really important for all individuals, but I definitely think that especially for, and we're talking about men, but we're really talking about those who identify in the masculine, right? So, and because I really want to make sure that, you know, and I know that you do as well, you know, inclusive language, right? So, so those who are kind of heavier or more dominant in the masculine energies, I think that there has been an unlearning that has to occur, right? Because there has been a lot of, and also I just want to point out, you're in the UK, correct?
I am, yes. Yeah.
But you go back and forth between the UK and Bali.
UK and Bali, and I go over to the States now and again. More so I have a kind of a network of sort of Arizona way. Yeah, Scottsdale.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm in the United States, so it just kind of speaks to the fact that it's not just a location specific a concern, right? This is a collective, universal shift that we're all going through at this point, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, and it's really getting into that deeper root cause work, and solution focused work, which is what you're talking about. Because if we can really, well, first of all, if we can identify that we don't even know what our purpose is, then that gives us the direction as to where to go in order to be able to help someone, right?
Sure.
So to discover the purpose. But then even further, what we realize is that one of the barriers to discovering our purpose, or really being able to do some of that healing work, is the fact that we are in this activation state, right? So leading into the surviving to thriving concept, you know, activation is basically survival mode. And so when we're talking about the autonomic nervous system, or we're talking about spiritual, or we're talking about just straight, you know, biophysical and science, or whatever it is, you know, when we're in survival mode, we're basically, you know, not able to make good long-term healthy decisions. They're very short-term, you know, kind of like crisis-oriented decisions. And we're meant to be able to have that. We're because if we weren't, we wouldn't, right? Yeah. But I think that we've collectively really been resting in that state. And it's not resting at all, really, but like we've been sitting in that state for so long. So what is it that you're seeing and that you've seen with regard to that? And what is it that's in your heart with that?
Yeah, and I think part of my hypnotherapy training had kind of, I had really brought my attention to that, you know, the amygdala and the fight, flight, freeze response and everything else, and how much we live in that space of survival. Because essentially we're mammals, right? So we're really well conditioned. You know, our primary function is survive, And now, yes, okay, it's not the, we're at the top of the food chain, so to speak, and there's not a lot that can really threaten our survival as far as animals or anything else like that. We live quite comfortably for the most part. But now there's kind of other enemies, other predators, and it's almost like we've created them as well. So it's like, oh, it's this person over there, or it's that person's different from me, or it's the pressure from the job, or our relationships, or whatever it is. We always make something that we need to secure ourselves from, and it's I find it fascinating that there's almost like, in a way, it's a beautiful paradox, because we want to escape, or there feels like a need to escape the survival state of being, but at the same time, it's the recognition of being in that space that gives us the wisdom or the platform then to look at something else. So, in more so a thriving state or creative state, if we have the awareness and wherewithal to sort of choose something else.
Yes, awareness is key. Absolutely, awareness is key, because I think that that's really if there's so many silver linings. I think that there has been such a chaotic and a traumatic year for us in so many different ways, and I think we're just starting to get a glimpse of maybe how long term some of these effects might have been, especially from the past year and a half, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that there's also been a lot of silver linings, because we have really had this opportunity for those of us who have maybe gone through some awakenings, saw it coming and knew when we were in the moment of it. But some of us haven't really had those awakenings, right? So there's been these great awakenings, which creates awareness, or the opportunity for awareness, right? Yeah, which is, I think, why more and more individuals like yourself, and even like myself, in these spaces, can help people on a global level to be able to understand really what it means to be in that hyperactivity, right? In that state. And so I want to dive into, because I think I love the fact that you dropped this bomb, with regard to, we're really creating a lot of these, not all, right? But, everything is mental, right? Yeah. So when we can really sit and look at things, to understand that we are creating a reality and a perception of a victim and a villain.
Yeah, 100%. That's such a, again, I love the way the universe and the world is set up, because they're beautiful paradoxes, because there's, again, having the gift of that awareness, and also it's a bitter pill to swallow sometimes. Essentially what you're saying is, actually some of this stuff that we're going through is of our own creation. So that stings a little, but it's also very liberating at the same time. And even when you can bring it down to my own personal experiences, and I love that this time has shown us that just how much it's forced us to stop or slow down, and then force that introspection on us. And some of it can be difficult. I remember going through some stuff, and I'm thinking, God, wow, I just need to cut off from some social media and everything else. I'm not sure whether is this my energy? Is this the collective's energy, or is it a combination of both? And what is it that I want? And what am I found myself trying to realign with my values and checking those out, and really assessing myself and how I show up in my relationship to others as well. And like, okay, are they kind of coming with me, or are they hindering me? And where am I going now? What do I want to do? And all those types of things. All those questions can be overwhelming, and you, to the point where you just, okay, I just want to ignore it, and then you want to go back to an old way of being that's probably not beneficial to where it is that you want to go, or your own sense of self or well-being. Yeah. So it's I've kind of lost my train of thought now, but I feel like there's a very unique point to all of this at this point in time, and there's a separateness from ourselves, and we're being forced to sort of try and have that unity again, trying to unify with something that's actually greater than us, but also that greatness is within us. So whatever you want to call it, spirituality, God, or to recognize the God within yourself, you know. And when we do that, then there's kind of, you see that when you look at some of the stuff that's coming up, this shadow, you know, all this collective stuff and all the divisiveness and how that seems to play out and wants to tap into our survival mode. Yes. It's so much so that like, it's hard to take. You know you want something different, then actually, I think the awareness of all that stuff that's going on, it just doesn't make sense anymore, you know. So I'm like, actually, I feel when I see these atrocities happening, it could be like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, the stuff that's going on in the Palestines and everything else, all of these things come into the fore, which are hard to take and hard to watch. But equally, for most human beings, they can feel that pain with them, and the reason being is because they are them as well. So there's a kind of there's a recognition of our connectedness to each other, right?
Yeah. And exactly, that's exactly it, right? So the fact that we have an opportunity with every single external situation to us to be able to transmute it, right? So we're all these alchemists. We can alchemize things, right? And so, yes, it is completely tragic, all of the different things that have happened, especially when it comes to human life being threatened and or oppressed, or I mean, it really is, it's very painful to see. That's part of the Great Awakening, though, is to force us to see things that we, to your point before, we had a lot of creature comfort conveniences to not be able to see it anymore, you know? So we could just kind of hold ourselves up, and I guess we always can do that, but we could just hold ourselves up. We had a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different devices to be able to avoid really the truth of what is. And I think that, you know, the evolution, especially of social media, there's a lot of divide and like perception and opinion and all of that stuff. And I'm not here to promote any particular, you know, vein or lane of social media, but I think I'm in favor of it if we use it well.
Yeah.
Right. But one of the things that social media has done is it's connected us all over the world, right? I was able to take my somewhat local business, regional business, even stateside business into an international business, in the flash, you know, just because you're able to be seen and people can connect with you from all over the world, where we really didn't have that platform unless we were really in a niche, right? Where we were niched in, and then we had to kind of wait for our turn, waiting in line in that old structural kind of systemic way that we're so used to, that we're still unlearning how to do, right? Sure. So yeah, so we have these wonderful opportunities. So as we see these global crises going on, we also have in that exact moment, the opportunity to be able to then create global consciousness, global awareness, and even movements that aren't divisive, to your point, but are really inclusive. And that can allow us to be curious about our differences, or to allow us to be able to ask some of those uncomfortable questions, right? Because what makes it uncomfortable is some of that programming that we've had, right? As far as like, we were taught that if someone speaks this way, does this thing, and there's just cultural context that comes with everything, right? So if we have the opportunity to be able to connect and just say, hey, listen, you know, I'm just letting you know, like, I'm going to be stumbling in here like a broken beer bottle. Like, I have no idea, but I'm here and I want to know and I want to connect, right? When we set forth the intention, then it helps to create a little bit of a more neutral platform.
Yeah, sure. And you know, and going back to survival and speaking to that, I think there's one of the things that we don't do. I think there's so much wisdom and there's so much gifts when we can stop and look at our own shadow or our unconscious biases, think, oh wow, I didn't see it that way, and have that awareness around it, rather than just like kind of gaslighting it and no, it's like this, and and creating evidence to argue against something. We'll just and be really open and honest with yourself, and just that helps ease the grip of that survival mode as well, because you can recognize that within yourself, and then therefore you have more compassion, automatically have more compassion for others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned a term which I'm aware of, and especially when it comes to recovering from narcissistic abuse and interpersonal violence and all of that stuff, but gaslighting. So if you don't mind, because I don't know that everybody's going to know who's watching this, like what gaslighting means, and you're using it in a different kind of a context, right? But it's really means the same thing. So can you break that down?
Yeah, I suppose for me, I use that term as I've had it before. I've had some great debates with somebody over race in particular, and he would, rather than, and he's a white gentleman, and rather than kind of see it from my side of things, or not even see it from my side of things, or want to look at his own unconscious biases. Not that I'm not pointing the finger. He would present information that counters what I'm saying, like I'm not supposed to, not feel that way, or you're it's a discounting of my experiences, or how my feelings, I guess, for want of another word. So it's so in that sense, and it's really difficult because we can want to do it. It's almost like it's a defense, but you can't even. Sometimes I think it was subconscious for him as well. He didn't realize, not gay. No, he didn't get over it, but it was almost like that, So no, I don't see that way. So it's almost like I read something the other day where the difference between like denial and skepticism. And let's face it, it's really difficult to find good quality information. This is why we were going back and forth. So I'm like, but skepticism means that for me, that you're open then to interpretation, you're open to hearing some information that can change your mind, whereas denial is pretty much you just kind of blocking that. No, this is what I believe. And of course, as you know, it's really difficult to want to change someone's beliefs and everything else. And I think this is why we have the kind of, don't want to say it sound too coachy in my speak, but it's just really difficult. The cognitive dissonance, the kind of like, no, this is the way, and that's it. So, yeah,
right. And it can be very subtle. So gaslighting can really be very subtle, not to the person who's the recipient of it, because we automatically feel it, right? But really, it's just a denial of your own experience.
Yes.
So you burn your hand on the stove and it hurt, and you say, wow, that really hurt. And you're kind of going through whatever your response is to the fact that you just burned your hand on the stove, and somebody says, well, it's not that bad.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
Just something like that. But when we're talking about our living example of how you have, because of who you are and all of the different facets and beautiful ways that you're made up of, and that because of other people's beliefs and biases, that it may have really caused negative reactions and responses to you, right? That has shaped part of your potentiality of the way that you view the world, right? And so when we have those two things coming together, basically we're all that. You are that, I am that.
Yeah.
But when you and that gentleman came together, you were both kind of that, right? But the difference between the two of you is that you're open to someone else having their own experience, and he wasn't. And so when that happens, gaslighting is pervasive. And when we have gaslighting, then that automatically can send us, if we don't have that higher awareness, right? And so that's where that connection to something greater than ourselves comes in, right?
Yes.
Because when we have that connection to something greater than ourselves, then we can realize that it's not you. It's not just about you and a alignment against you, but it's really just about like, wow, this is just the state of the way that things are right now. And what is it that I can do that I can help to create a better, more open, inclusive, compassionate space?
definitely. And yeah, it's interesting because it has been like a test for your own. If you have that type of awareness, then it's a test to notice what goes on within you at those times as well. Because sometimes you may still have that reactive emotion, but there is still, within that emotion, there is still the opportunity. There's another door to choose. There's another door to walk through. Should you want to,
Yeah.
or should you want to take that? And that sometimes that step takes, it can take some faith, because you want to be. And it's really easy to be pulled into that environment again. And I think that's still part of the whole survival state, to be pulled into that environment where, again, it's just, you're just kind of butting heads, or you're just in a space when there is no real trust, I guess, in yourself or in the situation or anything else. So you're just kind of swimming around, whereas you're to step out of that and it's almost to turn your back on it, and feel like it will be okay.
Yeah, turning your back on it, and that kind of goes back into putting your head in the sand, right? Like, so it's and we don't want to react, but we also have to realize where we are. So if we are, the first step, I know that you say this too, like, meet yourself where you are. So if you know that while your goal is to be able to handle those situations, like, with ease, right now you realize that you're not quite there. So you're just going to greet yourself with compassion. You're going to greet yourself with love and just say, okay, I'm going to bookmark this. Maybe now isn't the time to have this conversation or to be able to have any kind of a resolution for anything, but realize that I'm going to work towards that greater resolution. And that kind of speaks into that whole, like, push button society that we are, right? So I want something and I press the button and I get it now. Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so even our own evolution takes time, and somebody will say to me, and I'm sure that they say this to you too, like, well, okay, I want this result. How long is it going to take?
Yeah, exactly. Come on. Yeah. Next week, 2 weeks. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And it's, I think it's, we have such ease to have everything at a high speed. It's almost, I think, Seth Godin talks about the race to the bottom, making things cheaper, faster, quicker, and everything else. But who really wins that race? And I think there's definitely a beauty in the kind of the slower process. And I think that's what, again, this is what this last year has shown us. We've had no choice but to slow down. And in that end, then if you're happy to sit there, which a lot of people aren't to start with, then when you can, then you can start to see the nuances and the lessons and everything else. And there's so much going on in the nothingness. So, we've been distracted and everything going at 100 miles an hour. We just, it's like the humanity's has ADHD or something, it's realigning to a pace that is more, more useful for the individual.
Absolutely. Yeah. I humanity has ADHD.
It's a meme, isn't it?
It is. I think we should make the meme, put our names in it. Yeah. So, gosh, 100%. And, I think that what part of it is that there is a resistance to change. Right. Yeah. And I think that we are in a constant state of evolution. I mean, if we think about, even if we're just talking about the physical structure of our bodies and our brains, right? So our brains have literally physically shifted and changed and evolved over time. So, Homo sapiens sapiens didn't have a prefrontal cortex of their brain. Like, it was non-existent. Right. And so now it's a newer thing for us, and only a couple thousands of years that we've really been developing the prefrontal cortex, which brings us into this whole new state. Yet the resistance of really being able to use it, even if we want to, there's still that physical resonance, that emotional and energetic resonance that really wants us to kind of go back to that primal instinct of whatever we used to be. Yeah. But really, if we look at, even if we just take it into the context of business, right? Business used to be the way that we used to monetize, right, or care for ourselves, is it was whoever was the strongest, or was physically the strongest, right? And then it kind of shifted, push, pull, or drag, and we're still having some tension with that, right? Where
Yeah.
it was then whoever was the most intellectual, right? Whoever was able to use that part of that intellect, that strong piece of intellect in their brain. But what both of those were disconnected from was the coherence of all, the holistic self, right? The body, the brain, the emotions, the spirit, the energy, and what we bring, and kind of that resonance, that vibrational resonance that stays behind, kind of like dust off your shoes, right?
Sure.
So what we're now realizing is that we really, the success, a long-term success and healthy success, comes from us being in that full embodiment of a healthy body, a healthy mind, healthy spirit, healthy energy. And so I think that those who really put their stake in the ground based on the one thing, right? It didn't necessarily, they're a little more resistant to it, even though it wasn't necessarily bringing them all of what they wanted for the long term, because it sent them into survival mode. Like, oh my gosh, what happens if I lose this one thing, right? So, so I think that, when it comes to business, especially, that speaks right into men, because historically the masculine energy, those who embodied more of the masculine energy, were the ones who were the providers, were the ones who were kind of, foraging and bringing things back to the home to be able to provide, right?
Yeah.
So how is that factoring in to you in what you are providing for your men? And are you doing, and also I'm curious about, are you doing retreats, or like what are the upcoming events too that are coming up for you?
Yeah, it's interesting that you spoke on that as well. And I think for thousands of years, I'm not sure, for whatever reason, and this is my personal take on it, is that the men have been, for some reason, maybe it's actually a society thing, the patriarchy or whatever, or there's an element of that masculine that it's still immature, and you see that in our leadership, at high levels. There's the immature masculine that is kind of running the show, where there's almost like a for whatever reason, a disconnection from the feminine energy within themselves. So of course it's all going to be up here, then it's all going to be intellectual, and we're not allowed to speak, and we need to survival of the fittest, and only the stronger survive, and man up, and all these kind of things that have like just impacted everybody, just men and women, how business in particular as well, and not being devoid of especially the heart, and using your whole being. It just is almost alien to a lot of guys. And it's the guys I work with at the moment, they are very much like, they're uber successful in one sense, but their lives are a wreck. Their relationships are no good, or there's affairs going on. There's some sort of vice that they're used to, food, porn, alcohol, drugs, whatever the thing is. And it's all of that is used to try and escape something. They're trying to run away from themselves. I laugh, but it's not funny at all. But I laugh because I've been there as well. So you try to sprint away from, you're literally running away from your shadow. And rather than bringing every single part of you along with it, and then having that kind of, everybody's got a seat at the table, I always say, every part of you, every part of your psyche has a seat at the table. And from that, you kind of remain in a bit more control of yourself in totality, in that sense. And then you'll spot what part of you is showing up, or what part of you you're acting from at that point in time. For me, I think this year we're going to do some stuff in the UK, and then I'm hopeful that I'll get out to Bali again and do some work as well with some groups. And there's some of them are co-gender, and others are just men's work as well. But I love that, because I love you. For me, even though part of my masculine journey is to understand the feminine as well, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
I've done some stuff I've done some stuff this year, actually. I did for 6 months. I did what was called like a feminine cleanse, and the idea was that I couldn't get nourishment from the feminine. So in one sense, there's no flirting, no dating, any of that type of stuff. And obviously, the pandemic made that a lot easier. But
Yeah.
it was still it was still very interesting, challenging. And then I was accessing the feminine within myself, and obviously the ultimate feminine, Mother Earth, and just
Yeah.
spending time with that. And it just, things would come up for me, relationships with how I was relating, understanding my relationship to my mum,
Mm.
and how that was forged, and wanting to please and please the feminine, and or save them. And it's like, oh man, so much come up from that. So that integration was a beautiful beautiful part for me. So I'd love to take some men on that type of journey as well. It's not always, if they're single or they're having patterns of relationships that they don't want, then it's a really powerful practice.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, and I love the fact that you're speaking into the fact that we're all a makeup of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. So if you identify as a woman or a femme, that doesn't mean that you're all feminine energy, right? So that,
Yeah.
yeah. So because I know you and I know this, but whoever is watching this, this may be the first time that they're really hearing this kind of language. So, um, so yeah, we're all this makeup of feminine and masculine energies, and we also, and what pours into us, those energies are those around us, right? Our family structures, our societies, our communities, all our cultures, all of that. And so and then we also have our own inherent, kind of soul print of whatever it is that our own karmic journey is. However, I think that all of us are here because we're all reflections of one another, and one of the things that we're all experiencing. So I love the fact that you're speaking to your own personal journey that you've taken with kind of healing some and nurturing some of those
Mm.
aspects of that feminine energy within you, because that's really what we're all here to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you and like, oh my gosh, poor you. It's actually like, thank goodness you're doing that,
Yeah.
because this is a great mentorship of in modeling of what other individuals really can take the steps to be able to do. And like you said, what better time than during this slowdown,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And yesterday I was talking with a group about the pause,
Mm.
right? Because we really think about things in a very like, I'm either not doing something or I'm doing something, right? So I'm creating or I'm doing something, right? And I'm asserting and I'm leaving the legacy of the creation that I've done. But there's this pause that's in between that is really the essence of who we are. It's the receiving of whatever those things are, the thoughts about how we're going to be able to leave the legacy, and all of those different physical and energetic embodiments. And I remember the first time that I really had in an adult life the time of the pregnant pause, when I was working in business and I was working with a different culture, and they had, and here being in the US, there was a huge, like, everything had to be fast, and it was just like, you had to be able to survey the scene and like be able to pick things out, and just kind of move really quickly and talk really quickly. But then I was in this business meeting, and it was led by a different culture, and they probably gave birth to the pregnant pause in business meetings, right? And I remember greeting myself in that first time where there was this silence, and at first it was painful, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, and of course I made it personal about myself, maybe it's because I'm here, or maybe it's because something I said earlier, or whatever it is, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. And it was like, actually, no. When I became a witness to it, it was that we were all greeting ourselves in the moment of this kind of innervation, right? It's an innervation, right, of these big multi-million-dollar projects that we were working on, and we allowed the space for the pregnant pause. And so I think that in many ways, that's what we're doing now.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I wish there were more cultures, there'd be more of that. But I'm really excited as well at the future. I think this what a great time to be alive, right? I know all this is stuff going on as everything else is going on, but there's a lot of turmoil and uncertainty and whatever. And this is what I feel like the only thing that can heal that is the pregnant pause. There's so much value in doing nothing. There's a mentor of mine. He always uses this phrase: "Don't just stand there, do nothing." Yeah, and it's so true. There's so much power in that, and like you say, and it's always something that is beyond. It's in alignment with probably what you want or you'd like to achieve, but there's always it's how it comes about is greater beyond, always greater and way beyond your own comprehension.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's a wonderful time to be alive. And so that kind of speaks into the thriving section of things, right? Which is we really can thrive in these times, right? We obviously have to greet the crisis. We have to get through the crisis and we have to attend to things in the crisis. But then the crisis, we can then create a thriving mindset, and we can create thriving circumstances and environments for ourselves, even in the crisis, once we're kind of, in this very, very long pause, right? And so what would you say are some keys to that for you? I mean, obviously we've talked about like what to do, and the eventual outcome is just, just to kind of be, right? But how can, maybe someone who's not there yet, or what is it that you think would be some good kind of legacy information for individuals?
Yeah, as you were speaking, you were just thinking of the whole, the death and rebirth process, but to make it more simple, the chrysalis, of a butterfly, from the transition from caterpillar to butterfly, and how even any type of early intervention with that process, which is, let's face it, a huge struggle, then the butterfly isn't fully formed. So there's almost like a surrendering to the crisis, or to that point of turmoil, or whatever that thing is. There's a surrendering, and also, a surrendering, a letting go. And then even if you don't know what the next step is, you just want to know what the next step is. That's the next thing to do. That's the point number one. I think, okay, well, and again, I always use this thing called like nature as a beautiful teacher as well, because of the seasons that we have. For most people, they're quite, so in our winter months, then autumn and the winter, then it's about you're not going to be going all out. It's going to be dark. There's going to be darker. You need to be hunkering down and preparing then for things to change. The leaves fall. They land on the ground. They then actually nourish the roots, the very roots, for spring and summer to come again. And then in summertime, towards the end, you're preparing for winter again. It's cyclical, and we can see that in our lives. There's been many times when you think, oh, if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't be the person I am now, right? And so it's almost to remember that, and then again having some sort of awareness to think, well, okay, well, this is clearly I don't want this at this point in time. So what is it that I do want? Is there's it's almost like it's an indication for change. But change, we don't really have control of that as such. But it's just about, but what we do have control is how we might want to change, or have some sort of sense of direction in that.
Yeah, so look for the opportunities of being a witness during the cycles, and realize that you're just in a cycle of change. It's a constant shifting and changing. And so even if all we do, especially in the most challenging moments, is just stand still and be, we know that that the natural order of things is that things will continue to change and shift, right? So we're like our own, it's the micro and macro.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. I really love that. And I think that especially for people who are really struggling still, it would be, this is going to land on some ears that will be very helpful. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And just another thing as well, I think it's Dr. John DeMartini, he always used to say that, you know, challenge and support exist at the same time.
Yeah.
They're in the same space, right? So it could be a moment of, it could be just as a matter of focus or faith, even though you can't see it right now. You could be heavily focused on the problem or the issue or the challenge. Then to know that there is, okay, even to ask the question, that's interesting. This is the challenge that I'm focusing on. I wonder where the support is then, because it's in the same room as you. And that's so that's reassuring, and B, that means we might be able to start looking for it, and so it comes round into our vision at some point, you know.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love that. The support is there. The support is always there. You are always supported. In my own practice, I always say, you know, I am divinely supported in all ways, always. Right.
Yeah.
And we really are. I really believe that we are. So, I want to thank you so much. It's always so great to connect. And I thought to myself the last time, we need to do this more frequently. And now I'm saying it again. We need to do this more frequently.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so excited for you with regard to your new branch of the tree with your services and how you are helping men. And it is so needed right now. So thank you. And blessings to you. And hopefully if you're in the United States, that you definitely let me know if you're on the East Coast.
I will, of course. Yes, I will do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.